Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up from May 11th through 17th. This week I read 4 books, I watched 2 movies, and I listened to 1 book. I'm having that usual first thing in the morning, is that what my voice sounds like moment? But if my voice sounds a little bit rougher than usual to you as well, I'm very sorry. Last night I went as a +1 to my roommate's spirit club, where basically everybody brings a bottle and then you get to sample from whatever they've decided the night is going to be, and it was rum, and there were 13 different bottles of rum, and I had some of all of them. I feel like I sound different, but I feel fine. The first book that I read this week is The Pledge. This book is about a character who at the very beginning of the book survives an attack by a slasher, which obviously puts a damper on his mental health. He spends the next couple of years really worried about security, doesn't want to go out of the house, he knows this is impacting his dad and his little brother who he lives with. But it's basically come around to the time where he should be going off to university, so that's exactly what he does. Now at first he kind of doesn't want his past to follow him to university, but he comes to the realization that people are going to find out, so he decides to get ahead of the story by telling a frat house he's trying to pledge at that, yeah, if you want to look me up, this is my name, yes, that is me. And unfortunately for him, his mother took his tragedy, wrote it into a best-selling novel, gave the bad guy a scary mask, and somebody wearing that mask starts committing murders on the campus of his university. So, you know, this is all sorts of messed up. From there it becomes a who's doing this, and once you find out who's doing this, you're kind of like, but is it really this person that's doing this? And more importantly, how do we make them stop? I had a good time with this one, so if you enjoy slasher flicks or slasher books, as I'm coming to enjoy, you'll probably enjoy this one as well. On to my second book, and that's Tegan and Sara Crush. This is the second in a middle grade graphic novel series, starring these 2 characters named Tegan and Sara, and it's also written by 2 women named Tegan and Sara. You might have heard of them before, they're musicians. And although this book takes a lot of inspiration from when these 2 characters were in middle grade and becoming a band and all those types of things, they're not exactly the same people, which you'll know because this isn't set back in the 1990s when these people were actually in middle grade. This is taking those experiences but having them in the 2020s, which admittedly is a little bit weird, but I can see arguments both ways. In this installment of the graphic novel, both of the twins are experiencing crushes, obviously, hence the title, but they also have a manager and they've changed their band names officially to Tegan and Sara instead of Gunk. They write some more songs, they make their first music video, they're gonna open for this band they really like. But obviously there's some fights, some strife, some drama along the way. I don't really have much else to say besides I enjoyed my time with this. Speaking about a graphic novel that I enjoyed my time with, the next thing I read was Leap. This is about these characters in Romania, specifically in Bucharest, who are at this elite dance school. Some people are in the classical track and some people are in the contemporary track. There's actually one person in each who are secretly dating each other. Our main character Anna is in the contemporary track, but she is dating this girl who's in the classical track. But like I said, nobody really knows about them. They've been together for about 3 years, and when they're together and it's just them, it's great. But she kind of really wants to be out, her girlfriend doesn't want to be out, and also her girlfriend kind of monopolizes her time quite a lot. But anytime she asks her to be there for her, it doesn't really work out. At the beginning of the school year, Anna is moving into a new dorm room, and it's just a 2-person dorm room, so she only has 1 roommate, and that is Sara. Sara is a fantastic dancer who's also in the contemporary track, and she unfortunately is realizing that she has a little bit of a crush on one of their teachers, which is not great considering she's twice her age. But also this is the first time she's really realizing to herself that, hey, maybe I like girls. The author of this one is from Romania and used to dance, so I really enjoyed that they were able to bring that experience into this graphic novel. The last book that I read with my eyeballs this week was The Hours. This is something I went into not knowing absolutely anything about it, and unfortunately I really would have liked to know more about Virginia Woolf before I went into reading this book. Let me tell you what it's about. It starts out with a prologue from the perspective of Virginia Woolf, although you don't know who that is until basically the end of the prologue because it uses her last name for a while and then eventually it uses her first name, so if you've ever heard of her you can put the 2 and 2 together. And this prologue takes place in 1941 at the very end of her life. From there we get the perspective of a woman who goes by the code name of Mrs. Dalloway because she has this friend who gave her the nickname years ago and it's kind of always stuck between them. She lives in New York at the end of the century and she is throwing a party for that same friend because he's supposed to be getting a literary award. In addition to those 2 perspectives, we get the perspective of Mrs. Brown, and she is a housewife in the 1950s in Los Angeles. Now as you're reading through one day of each of these women's lives, there are some overlaps, such as somebody will talk about roses, specifically yellow ones, ones, and then in the next scene somebody else will be talking about yellow roses for a completely different purpose. And you don't really know until the very last chapter how these people's lives are actually intertwined, which was interesting enough. Unfortunately, especially in the very beginning of this, I really did not like the writing style. It really goes on and on and on. And it's one of those writing styles where the author has crammed at least 5 sentences worth into one sentence, making it hard to follow. And then also at points I was like, did I understand this person's past correctly? Because it'll jump between what's currently going on and what's going on 50 years ago, 20 years ago, who knows, very quickly. And I'm just like, do I need to know this information? And I feel like, but cannot confirm, that Virginia Woolf's writing was kind of like this, which is why this book was written like that. But honestly, that's just me guessing. I do know, however, that this was made into a movie, and I think that I might watch it at some point. One, because it has Meryl Streep in it, who is also name-dropped in the book, which was weird. And two, experiencing it in that different medium might make me understand better why this got a Pulitzer Prize. As for the movies I watched this week, the first one is A Simple Favor. This one stars Blake Lively and Anna Kendrick, and they both have kids at the same school, and because of that they sort of become friends. One of them lives in a mansion with a husband who wrote one really good best-selling book, and the other one vlogs her recipes. Her husband unfortunately died a few years ago, so she's been living off the life insurance for that, and she's just trying to do her best as a single parent. Where the title of this movie comes out and the big plot twist comes out is the one that lives in the mansion calls the other one day and is like, can you do me a simple favor and pick up my kid from school today because I have to go do this thing? And she's like, yeah, sure, why not? And she does that, but then her friend never comes to pick up her kid, and she ends up having to call the husband, who's away in London right now because his mother broke a hip, to be like, hey, it's been 2 days and I still have your kid, like, what's going on? Where's your wife? And it becomes this mystery of what happened to the wife. This one was fun and twisty and turny. It had some really interesting humor to it, and they also made a sequel to this, so now I'm interested to see if I can acquire that and see what happens there. The other movie we watched this week is called La Dolce Villa. This is about a guy whose daughter is in a very small town in Italy and decides to buy a €1 house, which is actually a thing you can do in Europe, under the understanding that you're then going to take this derelict property and like update it, and you have to live in it in a certain amount of time. It's basically a scheme to get people to move to these smaller towns that are dying. He's basically gone there to be like, what are you doing? Why would you do this? And once she can't be talked out of it, he decides that he's going to basically try to help her renovate it so it can be flipped really easily, because he doesn't think that she actually wants to stay there. That was the part of the movie that all 3 of us were like, you can't actually do that. The terms and conditions of the €1 houses, you have to live in them for a certain amount of time. But the general population doesn't know that, so fair. As they're renovating this house, they're getting to talk to each other more, and they're getting to fall in love with the area more, and obviously there are romances. It was kind of cute. We did this really fun thing where we paused the movie right at the very beginning, and we made a bunch of predictions about how this movie was going to go based on the 1 or 2 sentences that we had for a synopsis. And we didn't get everything right, but we did get some things right, which made it a highly enjoyable game. As for the book I listened to this week, that was The Surviving Sky. This is the first in a series, and it's kind of a science fantasy type of series. What's happening in this series is that people live on these things called ashrams, and they're basically these discs of vegetation that are floating in the sky above the Earth, which is having a lot of troubles. Basically, it keeps going through these things they call Earth rages, which are just giant storms, making the planet not habitable. So people have been living on these floating discs for years. They have these people called architects who basically use mind science to be able to manipulate the flora and fauna to actually keep things going. However, unknown to the general population, that's been getting more and more difficult as time goes on. And if architects work themselves too hard, they run the risk of going ecstatic, which is basically like an evil version of being an architect. And if that happens, your powers get taken away from you. This is dual perspective between these 2 characters. One of them, the husband, is actually on the main council of the people that live on this floating disc. And then his wife is the other perspective, and she wants to be on the council, but she doesn't have architect powers. And because of that, she feels like the architects look down on general population. Their marriage is also a little bit strained right now because they actually haven't seen each other for about 7 months because he's been off working and has been too busy to come home. And the last time they really saw each other, they had a really big fight because he was like, it's time to finally have a kid. And she's like, you only want to have a kid because it strengthens your position on the council. And if we're going to have a kid, I want it to be because we actually want to have a kid together. One of the other reasons they clash is because she's an archaeologist and she's looking to the past to try to figure out what they can do to help the whole civilization survive that does not rely on the powers of the architects. And everyone looks at that like, why are you against architects? They're great. They're literally letting us survive. Like, come on now. This was definitely an interesting world, an interesting magic setup, and it was beautifully written, so I can recommend it for that. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!